Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So on Thursday, there are local elections, and nothing brings out our inner geekiness on this show than elections, so it must be time for...
It's Geek of the Week.
OK, Patrick Dunleavy from the LSE has set up the Democratic Dashboard website that I know all of you at home look at all the time. And here we are. Here he has put together this map, and we're going to set out for you what to expect on Thursday. So there's over 4,000 seats up for grabs across over 150 councils, mainly urban councils in England. What would a good night for each of the parties look like? Well, Labour should be getting over 200 seats because the last time these seats were up for grabs, Ed Miliband was the leader and they were doing OK, but Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party is doing better. So Labour should be putting on. The Conservatives need to be limiting their losses to around 75 seats, pretty precise, isn't it? And LibDems will be picking up some 30 seats. Not great, eh, Joe? And then here we have, well, that is nothing short of wipeout for UKIP, going down 125. Now, 40% of these seats are up for grabs in London, so that's a key battleground on Thursday night. Look at it right now. It is very, very red, and it could go even more red because there was a poll out. Yes, it's just one poll. It's just a snapshot, but nonetheless, look at that. A whopping 51% for Labour, just 30% for the Conservatives. If they got this, it would be Labour's best result in London for 40 years. And then London would look like this. What I want you to keep an eye on is this big blue patch here and this big blue, not so big, blue patch there. So if this is replicated, Labour does take Barnet, but look, still, interestingly, they do not take Wandsworth, where right now they are out campaigning very, very hard. Now, let's look around the country. This bit now does start to sound a little bit like the weather, but bear with me. Up here we have Trafford. This colour is blue, so right now it's Tory. And Labour want to get that, but then over here we have Dudley, and right now it's Labour, but Theresa May has some hope of getting that. So in summary, on Thursday, Labour expected to do pretty well in London. The hope for the Tories is that they pick up some of that support from former UKIP voters. Robert.
Thanks, Allegra. If I could just ask, perhaps you first, as for the moment, the token representative of Her Majesty's government.
Her Majesty's government's in a lot of trouble if that's the case.
I mean, obviously, local elections always matter because local government matters, but do you think they will have an impact on, you know, the national, well, effectively on how secure she is?
If you'd asked me that question a couple of months ago, I would have said yes. I think we've got beyond that for a number of reasons. I think the Prime Minister's actually in a better position than she was a few months ago. I think she's managed the whole sort of Brexit debacle. She's managed to keep the party together as we move from stage to stage. And I also think, obviously, with the Russian poisoning case as well, I also think that expectations are being managed. I think there's a good chance, you know, it shows how low the bar is being set, but I think there's a good chance we'll hold Wandsworth and Westminster, maybe even Barnet as well.
Are you worried the extent to which ethnic minority votes who might at some point have thought about voting Tory have presumably now been pretty alienated by this whole Windrush scandal?
Yes, of course. I mean, we had lost anyway, I think between 2015 and 2017, we had lost quite a significant share. We'd made a real progress since about 2010. It's a tragedy, and we have to work twice, 3 times as hard now to win back a lot of voters from ethnic minorities, I think.
What would be a good result for you, Kate?
Well, obviously, the real borough in London that Labour would love to win would be Wandsworth. But Wandsworth has hung on over so long, no matter what we've done and what's been happening in national government. I think it's going to be very difficult. There's been a very, very good campaign going on there, and I think a lot of activists have been working there rather than in their own, you know, areas, because in those areas where, for example, in my borough, it's overwhelmingly Labour, as is in other boroughs within inner London. And so I think that would be a good result. And of course, our expectations we're trying to lower as well, because we don't want that to look like, you know, if we don't get that's somehow some dreadful defeat.
Nationally, it's not been a brilliant time for the Lib Dems. Do you get any sense that actually there are pockets around the country where you're doing better?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's obviously still quite a few places where we are holding councils that we run, places like Sutton, South Lakeland, and we've got the mayoralty of Watford that we're defending, for example. So there's places of Lib Dem strength. But then I think what we're looking for...
If you don't make progress, do you think the case for the creation of a new centre party is reinforced?
I mean, to be honest, I don't think that's a case. I mean, everyone keeps talking about it. There's a reason that they don't do it. I think what we're looking to do is, you know, based on a very challenging set of results 4 years ago where we were wiped out in a lot of areas, we're looking to sort of get a foothold back in some areas that we can then build from. And, you know, I've been out and campaigning with people in different boroughs, and there is a lot of energy.
Are people listening to you?
Well, you know, we've now got 100,000 members, so we've got more members than we ever had before in our party's history, and the reception on the doorsteps is very different to what it was a few years ago. So there's that energy, there's that enthusiasm, and I think that bodes well for the future.
Now, on Thursday, as we've just been hearing, millions of people in England will be heading to polling stations to vote in local council and mayoral elections. It will be the first big test of public opinion since last year's general election, in which, of course, Theresa May lost her majority. Labour are expected to do well, especially in London, although that anti-Semitism scandal could hurt them in places like Barnet. Now, I'm joined now by Michael Thrasher from Nuffield College, Oxford, also Sky's election expert. Lovely to see you. Just quickly, I mean, Michael, you surprised that neither Mr Cleverly nor Mr McDonnell want to come out and tell me exactly how they think they're going to do on the night?
No, it's about managing expectations in the local elections. And, of course, the Conservatives want to, if you like, exaggerate how poor their performance might be. Firstly, it energises their voters, and it puts us on alert to say that where they will say afterwards, well, it wasn't as bad as some people were forecasting, and largely themselves, of course. And it's the same for Labour also. So it's a management of news, if you like, before the local elections. But I will agree with him that forecasting elections these days is a dangerous business.
Oh, well, guess what I'm about to ask you to do? Of course, you're going to be in the studio with me from midnight Thursday into Friday, looking as those results come in. I mean, what would be a good night for Labour? Let's start with that.
Well, these elections are based on what happened in 2014, and Labour did manage to make gains there, and they did just edge the Conservatives in terms of the national vote share. But Labour really should be building on this basis, and so we think that around about 200 net gains in terms of seats for Labour is really their realistic target. Anything above that, of course, they will legitimately claim that they've had a very good night. Anything below that number would suggest to me that perhaps they haven't managed to perform as well as expectations have been played out in terms of London, and maybe have fallen back somewhere in some of the shire district areas that are also voting in England.
There is a degree of Conservative unease, isn't there, in London particularly?
Yes.
Wandsworth, Westminster, Barnet, Kensington and Chelsea. I mean, if the Tories, for example, let's just take one of those, if the Conservatives manage to hold on to Wandsworth, I mean, can they take that as a victory, given that Labour have been throwing everything at it?
Well, for sure they'll spin it in that way, but I think if they hold on to Wandsworth but lose Westminster, Westminster has been in Conservative hands since 1964. When the authorities were first established there. That really will be a major coup for Labour, and a big defeat, symbolic defeat for the Conservatives. We think if the Conservatives can manage their losses, they're probably going to make seat losses of around about 75. If they can do that, they will do so by maybe losing more seats than that in London, but winning some seats outside of London, where, of course, there are lots of UKIP seats available for them to win.
Well, just on that point, I mean, is this the set of local elections at which it's bye-bye UKIP? I mean, is it fair to describe this? And, of course, the Liberal Democrats are hopeful in certain parts of the country, but is it fair to describe this as essentially a contest, these local elections a contest between Labour and the Conservatives?
Yes, they are. Indeed, Liberal Democrats will come back, but for the most part, we saw in the 2017 general election that we've gone back to two-party politics. And in terms of the councillors that the two parties are defending, Conservative and Labour, they have the vast majority of the councillors that are up for re-election this time. So it really is legitimate to focus on the battle between those two parties. But the smaller parties will have a part to play in as much as UKIP in terms of where those seats go, and the Liberal Democrats could perhaps if they vote well, and they've been doing quite well in local council by-elections, if they do well, then they might actually harm Labour's chances of taking as many gains as they perhaps might.
And just very, very briefly, we will be extrapolating out from these results, of course, a kind of a national picture as well. But we can use those figures in that way, can't we? Very briefly.
In terms of history, the national projection is very important. Labour really needs to open up around about a 10-point lead over the Conservatives.
Brilliant. Michael, I will see you at midnight on Thursday into Friday. And that's your lot for this week.